Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with coverage of round 6 of the 2020 Candidates Tournament. And like we did in rounds 1 to 5, we're going to look at the highlights of all 4 games. I took this screenshot from the live broadcast of the St. Louis Chess Club, and these were the standings before round 6. Jan Nepomniachtchi is the leader with 3.5 out of 5. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave is half a point behind, and there are 3 players on 50%, Wang Hao, Caruana and Alexander Grischuk, who's the only player in the event who has not won or lost a game yet. On -1 are Alexeenko, Giri and Ding. These were the pairings of round 6. Grischuk against Caruana, Alexeenko Giri, Nepomniachtchi Ding and Wang Hao against Vachier-Lagrave. The first game to finish was that of the tournament leader, Jan Nepomniachtchi with the white pieces and Ding Liren on the black side. It is the 23rd of March 2020 and let's go through the opening moves. We see a Spanish and we're going to go to move 13. Let's put the moves on the board. The bishops got swapped. Bishop g5, and here Nepomniachtchi said that knight d7 or knight g4 is played by most people with equality, but Ding plays the line with queen d7. And Nepomniachtchi called this a brilliant move that served Ding well against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave in a game in London in December 2019. So Nepomniachtchi knew this line, he took on f6, bishop takes, knight d5 and a5. Here Nepomniachtchi had prepared a small improvement, rook b2, over the MVL against Ding game. A takes b4, pawn took back and bishop back to d8. c4 from Nepomniachtchi, knight d4, that knight was taken, e takes back and queen c2. Here Ding played rook e8, c6 is another option as mentioned by Nepomniachtchi in his interview after the game. Then the knight goes to f4 and then queen b7 or rook b8 to defend the b5 pawn from behind with a piece. Another way of playing. But as mentioned, rook e8 was Ding's choice. g3, just making a useful move, said Nepomniachtchi. B takes c4 and taking with the queen, more principled than taking with the d-pawn, said Nepomniachtchi. And now c6, kicking the knight, knight f4 and bishop g5, and Nepomniachtchi said, I could not believe this position was good for black. He played the knight to e2. He said knight g2 is maybe more accurate, but the drawback is that it's not controlling c3, and the knight on e2 is controlling that square. And now d5, and Nepomniachtchi said the setup with c6 and d5 is strategically very risky for black. It may seem promising from a human point of view, but it is quite risky. Nepomniachtchi took on d5, Ding took back with the c-pawn and queen b3. And Nepomniachtchi said here black is very lucky if he gets enough counterplay. White's b-pawn is a big asset for him. And black's extra pawn on the other side is a doubled pawn. Here Ding played h5, rook a6 is the alternative as shown by Nepomniachtchi to swing the rook over to h6, searching for counterplay on that side of the board. Then king g2 is possible, followed by knight g1, and my king is super safe and black will never have counterplay against the king, explained Nepomniachtchi. But rook a6 was not played, h5 was the move, and now king g2 is less good as h5, h4 can come, and that's annoying, said Nepomniachtchi. He played b5 instead. h4, the b-pawn keeps going, and h3, and there we have the alpha 0 pawn again, pushing the pawn all the way into the opponent's fianchetto position. Instead of h3, rook ab8 was suggested by Nepomniachtchi, and he said with some precise play, black should probably hold this. On the other hand, it's already no fun for black, because I can trade the b-pawn and the queen for the 2 black rooks. Then I will have 2 rooks and a knight against queen and bishop, with all pawns on one side. That will be nice for white, as I can create weaknesses in black's camp to get nice outposts for the knight. That would be an unpleasant endgame for black. Very interesting to hear Nepomniachtchi explain that in words. Very interesting to hear how top grandmasters think. But rook ab8 was not played. h3 was the move that Ding played as mentioned. And king h1, making room for the knight to come to g1 and protect white's king. And then also attack the weak h3 pawn. Weak and strong, it is a bit of both, that pawn. Here Nepomniachtchi showed a very nice variation, which is rook takes e2. Wonderful move, but it doesn't work, because after rook takes e2 and queen g4, with a checkmate threat, let's look at the checkmate threat, don't push your b pawn, because then there is queen f3 check and checkmate. So let's go back, we played queen g4 with a checkmate threat, so f3 is forced, but then queen takes f3 check, and if you take the queen, there is rook a1 check, and you can give all your pieces away, and it will still be checkmate. Like this. Very nice. So let's go back again. Black played rook takes e2. Why did he not do it? Rook takes queen g4. We saw black win in a couple of variations. But the refutation is very simple. Queen takes d5. Refutes the idea. Hitting the rook. And more importantly, controlling the f3 and g2 squares. White wins. Nice variation shown by Nepomniachtchi. Rook takes e2 does not work. So rook e2 b8 was played by Ding instead. Rook f2 b1, tripling on the b file. Bishop d8, and now Nepomniachtchi showed this line. He can push the pawn, then rook a7, knight g1, rook a takes b7, queen takes, rook takes, hitting the black queen, and black cannot hold on to the h-pawn, as the bishop is very badly placed on the back rank. For example, queen e6 to save the queen, rook b8, hitting the bishop cannot go because it's pinned, queen d6, and then knight takes h3, and white is winning. He will double his rooks on the 7th rank, and the two central pawns prevent black to create counterplay. These pawns are crippling black's bishop, as Nepomniachtchi explained. Let's go back. How did we get here? We had bishop d8 and then b7, rook a7, knight g1, and we just took on b7 with the a rook. Another line that Nepomniachtchi showed is g5. That's probably a better move to try and keep the h-pawn, which means the knight will have to stay passive to avoid being checkmated. But in the game, Nepomniachtchi decided against b7. He played queen b5. Here queen f5 is the best move according to the engine, and black should be okay. But Ding played queen g4 instead. And now queen e8 check, king a7, and taking on f7 is the best way to play according to the engine. But Nepomniachtchi did not give a check on e8, he took on d5. And now a very nice move from Ding, rook a5, trying to deflect the queen. Yes, that rook is unprotected there, but if you take it, we have this same checkmate again that we already saw. Nice move, rook a5. Nepomniachtchi played the queen to c6, keeping an eye on the f3 and g2 squares. And here, a very difficult variation is coming up. The way to play here for black, and the only move that keeps the position in the balance, is rook takes b6. Because after rook takes b6, there is queen takes e2, rook b8, and now rook e5. And this move is hard to see and easy to miss, and both players had missed it in their calculations. If you see rook e5, you should be disqualified, said Nepomniachtchi, because it looks so lost for black. Why is this holding for black? Well, he has a lot of play against white's king. You can take the bishop with check, king h7. You have to protect against queen e1 with checkmate to follow, so rook g1, and then queen takes f2, and white has to go and look for a perpetual to avoid being checkmated. But that rook e5 move in the middle of this variation was very difficult to find, according to Nepomniachtchi, and both him and Ding did not see it. So in this position, Ding did not play rook takes b6 because he had not seen that rook e5 move a few moves later. He played rook c5, and that's not a good move because now white is winning. Nepomniachtchi gave a check, king h7, knight back to g1, and rook takes b6, giving up a piece for the strong pawn, hoping to get counterplay against white's king. Nepomniachtchi took the bishop, took the piece. Rook takes b2, and now white's back rank is weak. And that's why Ding sacrificed that piece. Rook c1, and white only has one move not to get checkmated, but it's good enough. He can swap the queens with queen h4 check. Queen takes, g takes, and white has an extra piece. Rook d1 was Ding's last move, because after f3, making the time control, this is move 40, Ding resigned. He's a piece down. It looks for a second that he can win a few pawns and might play on. Rook takes d3, but then the knight can just take that pawn, and the f pawn cannot be taken because of the fork on g5. Check and attacking the rook. King g6, knight takes f3, and this game is over. So after f2, f3, Ding resigned, and Nepomniachtchi had wins back-to-back with white against the two Chinese participants. Nepomniachtchi said, "I don't feel great." He was coughing a lot during the interview, and he was planning to make a quick draw today. And he said, "I'm just trying to make less mistakes than my opponents," and so far that strategy has been very good. With 3 wins and 3 draws, Nepomniachtchi is leading the tournament. The next game to finish was Russia versus the USA. Alexander Grischuk with the white pieces against Fabiano Caruana. And as usual, we're going through the opening moves. We have a Spanish, Ruy Lopez, the Archangel variation, which Caruana played before in this tournament. Rook e8, an important move, not a novelty, but very rare, said Caruana. It looks like it doesn't work because of d takes e5, bishop takes e3 and e takes f6, said Caruana. It looks like it's tactically losing, but it works out for black, says the engine. And if the engine says that, it is true. After rook e8, Grischuk played knight g5. And we almost got a very short game because we see a move repetition. But here, after a long think, Grischuk decides not to go for the move repetition and plays rook e1, which is a pawn sacrifice, which Caruana called very dangerous for black. He wins a pawn by e takes d4, c takes d4, and knight takes e4. That e4 pawn is hanging. d5 from Grischuk, bishop takes e3, rook takes, and knight a7. This move was missed by Grischuk, which he called blunder number 1. It's the only move for black, as other knight moves will cost him material. But what about this one? Does queen d4 with a double attack not also win material? The knight on a7 is attacked, and the knight on e4 is attacked twice. Does white win a piece? No, there's a number of ways to get out of it, and one of them is bishop f5. Also missed by Grischuk, which he called blunder number 2. If you now take on a7, there is knight c5, hitting the bishop, and if you save the bishop, there is rook b7, winning white's queen. The queen is trapped. So after bishop f5, white cannot take on a7. He played knight b to d2 instead. Knight c5, a pair of rooks was swapped, rook e1. And Grischuk said, "I had to play the position being a pawn down, but I have compensation. I was clearly playing against Caruana's preparation. Playing against the engine is always difficult." Queen f8, bishop d1, b4. Let's put some more moves on the board till we get to the next moment that the players commented on in their interview after the game, which is here. Knight 4 takes b3, wins the pawn back, and now a lot of material comes off the board. Let's keep going. And here c5. Grischuk said, "I thought I had defended well, won the pawn back, but then I blundered c5, blunder number 3. Grandmasters, by the way, say they blundered when they miss a move. It's not always their own move that's a blunder. And Grischuk said, I was worse again here. Caruana thought that the position went from unclear to safe and better for black with that move c5. Let me show you, you cannot take that pawn en passant because then there is bishop e6 and that wins a piece for black in all variations. You can see that for yourself, it's not very difficult. So what to do after c5? You cannot take en passant. Queen d3, played by Grischuk. g6, and let's look at the next number of moves again. B takes c3 is move 40, and so is f5. And now knight d2. And Grischuk said, I was quite lucky that I had this move, otherwise I would really have been suffering to hold this position. And Caruana said he overlooked this move. He did not say he blundered it. He said he overlooked it, and by one tempo it's just holding for white. Let's see how this is holdable for white. I'll show you the remaining moves of the game. An endgame that Grischuk was able to defend. Knight takes e2, king takes e2 and bishop a4, and after 54 moves the players shook hands and this game had ended in a draw. And then we had China against France, Wang Hao against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. And the opening was a Grunfeld defense. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave is a great expert of this opening. We're going all the way to move 27. This is a long game. And my videos are getting longer all the time. I want to make sure they're not getting too long. Covering all 4 games takes quite a bit of time. Nothing unusual has happened so far. d5, move 27, was missed, blundered, overlooked by MVL. He also used the term blundered. He had missed his move. The queens were swapped. And knight a5. Hitting the bishop, bishop d3, and it's a typical Grunfeld position. White has a strong pawn on d5, while black has a majority on the queen side. E takes d5, e takes, and white brings the king in. The king comes to d4, and that looks nice for white, with a strong d-pawn, the centralized king, and the sidelined black knight on a5. White is better. Bishop c8 is the only way to create a route for the knight back into the game. And here Wang Hao went pawn hunting with knight b5. After the game he said g4 was a better try instead of going after the a-pawn. It looks very dangerous for black. g5 is a threat clamping down white structure on the king side. But Wang Hao played knight b5. He wants the a-pawn. a6. Knight c7, hitting the a-pawn again with 2 pieces. Both the knight and the bishop are attacking that pawn. King d6, and white did win a pawn. Knight b7, and it turns out black has a very good fortress. There's no way for white to make progress. And that's why Wang said he should have played a g4 move instead of going pawn hunting. We're going through the next number of moves. The time control has been reached, and a lot of going back and forth, shuffling around. Here if black takes on d5, then there is knight takes b6 check, and this a-pawn is suddenly very dangerous. So Maxime Vachier-Lagrave played king c5 instead, keeping the b-pawn protected. And let's go through more moves. This is move 54. Here a pair of pawns is swapped. Vachier-Lagrave took with the bishop. He said knight takes f5 check is bad because of knight takes, bishop takes and f4. MVL thought that this was a bad position for black, but Wang Hao thought that he would be able to hold this position, including playing up the b-pawn. And then Vachier-Lagrave more or less agreed. So here knight takes f5 is also possible. But bishop takes was played. This is move 56 and we're not anywhere close to the end of the game, so let's keep going. I'll just show you the remaining moves. This game lasted a total of 83 moves. And white is not really making progress. He kept trying. He has an extra pawn and he was trying to make progress, but black has a fortress. And Wang Hao was not able to break it. Another pair of pawns went off the board there. And king d5 was the last move of the game. The players agreed to a draw here. Wang Hao resigned himself to the fact that he cannot make progress. And the players both have an extra half point in the tournament table. And if you thought that was a very long game, then think again. This game was even longer. Kirill Alexeenko with the white pieces against Giri. It lasted a total of 98 moves. And I've decided not to show you all the moves in this game. The opening was in Italian, the Gioco Piano. And this is the position after the 50th move, knight f3 check. I'm showing you this position because here black wins a pawn. It's also a nice variation. The king has to go to f1. That's the only square that doesn't lose on the spot. And then knight takes h4. Very nice. Because you cannot take the knight, as there is queen h1 check with the skewer. The queen on a1 is lost. So what to do after knight takes h4? Alexeenko found queen a8 check. That swaps the queens. And knight f3, and black is a pawn up. In a knight endgame with all pawns on one side of the board. This is move 53. And we're going to the climax. This is move 86. g6 takes f5 from Giri. He's a pawn up, but the position is within a drawing margin. King e3 from Alexeenko. What is this? Can Giri now not just take the knight? Take a piece? No, he can't. Because it's all about these two pawns and white will be able to eliminate them. And then the game is a draw with king and knight against a king. King f4 is the move here. And then you can play knight c3. It doesn't really help. King takes f5. Knight d5. Trying to hold on to the last pawn. But then there is h5 and the knight has to go and stop the h-pawn and has to give up on the f-pawn. Let's look one more time at king takes h3. King f4, you can also then just take the pawn, but then king takes f5, knight c3, and king takes f6, and we have that unfair situation that black is a piece up, a full piece, but the game is a draw. So back to the game, king e3, and taking the knight does not win for black. Giri played knight c3, knight f2 check, king z3, and this is the moment of the game on move 89. Here Alexeenko made the losing mistake, and this really is a blunder. He played knight f2 to d3 and should have played the knight to h1 with check. And this is an immediate draw. If you take the pawn, then we have king f4. We're going to clean up those black pawns again. Knight d5 check, king takes f5, and this is a draw. Black cannot win this. So again, knight h1 check. And if we try now king g2 instead, then there is king f4, king takes knight, king takes f5, knight d5, and we start running with the h-pawn. We saw this already. Black has to go and stop the h-pawn with the knight, which then will mean that he loses his last pawn. If after knight h1 check, the king goes to g4, then we have knight f2 check, and we had this position already. This is a move repetition. Which means that after knight h1 check, black cannot make progress, and this game would have ended in a draw very, very quickly. But after almost 7 hours of play, Alexeenko did not see it and played knight d3, and now white is lost. Knight d5 check. We're going through the moves. We'll see how Giri played it. He did not make any more mistakes. Black has won the h-pawn, and this position is a win for black. King f1, f5, and here Alexeenko resigned, and we must feel for him. Why did he resign? If you play king e2, there is king g2, knight f1, f4, just to show you one variation. There are different lines that win. Knight d2, and then knight e4 wins. You cannot take that knight because this is a new queen. And if after knight e4 you go back to f1, then there is the double attack, knight g3 check, swapping the knights, knight takes, f takes, and this is also a win for black. Chess is a very cruel game. Again in this position after king g3, knight h1, check, holds the draw, knight d3, loses. And all that after almost 7 hours of play and 89 moves. Let's see if Alexeenko in the coming rounds can recover from this heavy blow. Here is a screenshot of the handshake and Giri immediately pointing to the h1 square, showing Alexeenko that he could have made a draw on the spot. Alexeenko then nodded his head, he had seen it as well, but he had seen it too late. So we had 2 draws and 2 decisive results in round 6, and that leads to these standings. Nepomniachtchi is now a full point clear of Vachier-Lagrave, and we have 4 players on 50%, Caruana, Grischuk, Wang Hao and Giri. Alexeenko and Ding are now 2.5 points behind on a score of -2. Unless a miracle happens, they will not qualify to play Magnus Carlsen at the end of this year. Tuesday the 24th of March will be a rest day, and round 7 will be played on Wednesday the 25th of March. And these will be the pairings Caruana, Wang Hao, and look at this clash, Vachier-Lagrave with the white pieces, number 2 in the standings against the leader Nepomniachtchi. That will be an interesting game. Then the 2 players in bottom place, Ding against Alexeenko, and we have Giri against Grischuk. I will be here after the round to tell you what happened. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel, and please leave a comment. I will read them all and I will reply to them all. If you like this video, if you like my coverage of the 2020 Candidates Tournament, then please share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter and on Facebook. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.